story.
Here in the city of Chicago, there is a bit of a sense of sadness as we begin what I've been calling the long goodbye for the Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr. In fact, we have a live picture inside of the memorials that have been taking place today as people have been filing through. This is just the beginning of what will be a week of services that will be happening both here in Chicago, in South Carolina, where he was born, and also in Washington, D.C. It's a moment. It's a historical moment, and people have been lined up since early this morning. I believe that the doors opened at Rainbow Push Coalition at 10 a.m. today, and people were there probably as early as 8 a.m. waiting in line to just have their time to say goodbye. And there will be several different opportunities. You can see right there next to the casket, to the left of the casket, is Congressman Jonathan Jackson, one of Jesse Jackson's sons. He's been greeting people. I'm not sure if the children are going to kind of be taking turns, but we did see Jesse Jackson Jr. earlier today, who was out with Al Sharpton, who also flew in from New York for this moment, and several other ministers, local ministers and authors who were there to pay their respects as well. But people have come from near and far. People have come from near and far. You know, even as you zoom out there, you see this line of people who are older, who remember Jesse Jackson as a young man who was strong in his beliefs and going throughout the country, mobilizing voters, some 6 million voters over the course of his life that he is responsible for registering and really changing what politics looks like and how we see it today. And then there are younger people who, look at this moment as a learning opportunity, learning about the Rainbow Push Coalition, learning about, someone who is now an ancestor, the wind beneath their wings, someone who came before them to push for equality, to push for change in this country that had a direct impact on the freedom that they enjoy today. So again, this is just the beginning of things that will be happening over the course of the next week or so, and we'll be staying on top of it all as it is such an important time for the city of Chicago, for sure. A place that he called home for many, many years, many decades, but also for the nation. And so we'll dip in as we can to the live pictures. We'll bring in guests as we can to speak about his life and his legacy. But I just wanted to start there as it is just beginning. And again, we will be taking different views of things both today and through not this weekend, but the weekend to come. We also have some live pictures outside of a courthouse. Let me take you from here to another live picture that we're looking at. This is actually outside of a courthouse where Hillary Clinton is testifying right now. Of course, both of the Clintons have been called to testify before Congress in the Epstein trial. And this is another one of those historic moments where you see a former president, former, delegates, former, heads of state who are now being called as we look to get more information about this disgraced sex offender and who he may have been connected to. It's important to note that neither of the Clintons has been directly implicated in any type of criminal activity. As we know it right now, the former First Lady is only in the files as someone that Jeffrey Epstein was looking up in terms of different articles that he was looking up. There is no direct contact that you see in the files as of right now versus her husband, the former president. There are many pictures of him with women over the years, and there is a record of him in flight logs and things of that nature. But again, neither of them have been implicated in any criminal activity thus far. We do know that Chuck Schumer Senator Chuck Schumer will be speaking very soon as well. He is expected to speak soon. So as we get more information about what's happening there in Washington, D.C., we'll be passing that along to you. Let me tell you a little bit more about what we have lined up for you in this first hour of Chicago Live. We have the managing director in KBRA's Public Finance Ratings Group that's going to be joining me to talk about Chicago's credit downgrade. Not the first time we've heard that in the last few years, but we're going to talk about what that means for borrowing costs in the city and how we could all, see the impacts, the ripple effect of that type of move made. Also, Elgin is moving to ban single-use plastic bags. This will be at major retailers. The ordinance doesn't actually take effect until June of 2027, but it's a good time to already go ahead and start having the conversations as the transition begins. And the sustainability manager is going to be joining me to talk about that. Plus, with everyone buzzing, there's so much buzz online about Waymo popping up with the autonomous vehicles. And right now they're not autonomous yet, but that is where they're going. Here in the Windy City, that there's a lot of angles to discuss with this. That is a major shift in the city. It's a major shift in the country. And so we'll be pulling in lots of different voices on that particular move as well. So today we have Mothers Against Drunk Driving Illinois that's going to be weighing in. I'm looking forward to all of those discussions. But we are starting with an important conversation about Illinois utility bills. There's some new reporting about millions in hidden expenses. Brian McDaniel, who is the Director of Governmental Affairs for CUB, which is the Citizens Utility Board, is joining me now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. I think more people need to hear about this. Kind of give me the high level. What's going on here? What are we seeing?
Well, many consumers have no idea that on our electric, gas, and private water bills, we are paying tens of millions of dollars to cover self-serving expenses that help utility shareholders and don't do anything to really help deliver gas or electricity or water to consumers. We've done an analysis of utility rate cases from 2023 to 2025 and found that in the average year, Illinois consumers would save about $40 million if we did away with paying for utility dues in trade associations that we pay for. Then these trade associations show up and lobby on behalf of utilities at the Illinois State Capitol and in DC as well. We pay for goodwill advertising that enhances the utility image and benefits shareholders. We pay for insurance protection that protects shareholders, and the largest amount of money we pay through these fees is for the utilities lawyers and expert witnesses. They're outside lawyers and expert witnesses that they hire when they try to present a rate case. When they raise our rates, we actually pay for their lawyers and expert witnesses. And I think when people hear about this, they're often surprised. They say, really, this ought to be a shareholder expense. These are business expenses that utilities are passing on to consumers, when in fact their shareholders ought to be the ones paying these expenses. And so we've helped introduce a bill here in Springfield, House Bill 4781, sponsored by Representative Teresa Ma, and Senate Bill 3497, sponsored by Senator Gloria Hilton. And we had so we're just trying to push these bills across. We'll be the fourth state to pass legislation like this. So we're hopeful. But again, whenever you take on the utilities in our capital, state capital, but national capital, it's always a uphill battle. And so we really appreciate you having us on so we can let people know about these fees and let them know about this bill so that they can contact their state reps and state senators and let them know that this is something they ought to support. It's common sense legislation. It would save consumers $40 million a year across their bills. And in a time of rising prices and, the affordability crisis we find ourselves in, this is an excellent way to make bills more affordable.
Tell me about the Utility Transparency Act. How does this factor into all of this?
Well, that's what we're working on here. And so this is the name of the bill is the Utility Transparency Act, where we're trying to make this more transparent, because what happens is we pay for all these fees, but it's not like there's line items for them on our bill. They're all buried within our customer charge and delivery charges. So we're just trying to shine a light on what's going on here so that when utilities have these rate cases, they can't go to the Illinois Commerce Commission and say, well, state law says we can recover these costs. Just because we've done something a certain way for a number of years doesn't mean that's the way it ought to continue to be done. And so, we're hopeful that the Illinois legislature will pass this common sense bill and, knock a little money off our utility bills. It won't be much, but in the aggregate, it means a lot to the utilities, right? To have these, you look at who supports their bills and who opposes their, bills they're opposed to, and they've got association after association that they, belong to, that then when they file a rate case, they have a list of association memberships they recover from customers. So customers get to pay for these associations to show up and lobby against them. And really, it just ought to be a shareholder expense. We're not saying utilities can't join these associations. Sure, go ahead, knock yourselves out. They quit making your customers pay for it. That's really the point of the bill.
Now, you mentioned 2 suburban Democrats that you were working with. What has been the response thus far to even the conversation at this point in things?
Well, again, it's always an uphill battle when you're taking on utilities. They are a big player. But we've had very positive conversations. We hear a lot about affordability. This bill is about affordability. That's exactly what this bill's about. It's trying to make utility bills more affordable, and it's trying to level the playing field amongst utilities and their opposition.
Are you getting any bipartisan support? Do you have any Republicans who have said they'd sign on for this too?
I don't have any Republican co-sponsors currently, but I think if we could get this bill on the board and get it voted on, I think it may have some bipartisan support for sure in this environment, right? That's the utilities' goal, is to make it so that these bills get buried. They get sent to committee, and then they, push the chairman to put them in subcommittee, right, where they don't have to be addressed and never voted on. But I think if this bill could get on the board, I think there'd be a lot of bipartisan support for this bill.
Let me ask you this. Is this the first time you all have tried to
No, this is,
like
again,
this?
yeah, whenever you try to do something good in Springfield, it usually takes longer than a year. So this is probably the third session we've introduced this bill. We make changes to it every year in response to things the utilities have said. For example, we used to have charitable contributions in the bill, right? So when the utilities go around and they make charitable contributions to groups, which is great, wonderful, but they recover those from ratepayers. We've heard, from folks that's something that ought to continue. These a lot of utilities donate to a lot of good groups, and we're certainly not after those groups. We just want the shareholders to pay for those expenses. So this bill's been amended, it's been changed in an attempt to try to garner more support. We've listened to constructive criticism of the bill, and we've tried to respond and make it more palatable.
And what do you think will get it across this time that wasn't there before?
Well, again, just educating more people, and times change, right? Things are getting more expensive every day. Affordability is a major focus where it hasn't been in past years. And so hopefully this is the year. You just, as a consumer advocate, you can't give up, even though you bash your head against a brick wall a lot of times down here. You just keep doing it. And as the times change, as you continue to educate more and more policymakers, as you continue to add more groups to your coalition, you start to get more and more people's attention until you finally get over that hump.
As I understand it, there have been 3 states at the very least that have passed something similar to this. What are those states, and what do you think they're doing differently that Illinois is not?
Well, Connecticut, Maine, and Colorado are the 3 states that have passed the bill so far. I can't speak to what maybe they're doing differently. I just hope that, lawmakers in Illinois set up and take notice of, other states that have taken this action. And it's a way to help lower utility bills and chip away at utility political power. And, it's really kind of, when people hear about this, we delivered thousands of petitions yesterday to the House and the Senate, thanks to our friends at 350 Chicago and AARP who we're partnering with on this bill. We delivered thousands of petitions to the General Assembly because when you talk to consumers, they say, now, wait a minute, we're paying for their lawyers and their witnesses to help to raise our rates. Boy, that sure sounds like that ought to be a shareholder expense. So you talk to everyday people, and there's the support is strong for this bill. But, our capitals are a little different places than, just general society, where these utilities have loud voices. And we're just trying to make ours louder, and we appreciate you having us on to let people know about this bill. because again, it's a common sense measure. It's low-hanging fruit in our eyes that the state ought to move on and take care of.
And I guess I'm asking you about other states because I would wonder if I'm trying to advocate for something and I see someone else pass something similar. Obviously, every state's interests are different, but I would wonder, have you picked up the phone to call them to ask, okay, how did you get it across?
Well, yes, we've talked to the groups in the other states. Every state has different political dynamics, whether it be partisan or not, or Democrats, Republicans, different levers of utility power. In Illinois, we have very strong labor unions who are allied with the utilities because that's who they work with. So that, represents another issue in Illinois in trying to pass bills like this. But yes, we have, it's not for lack of trying, my friend. It's just our political system is such that you're taking on very powerful interest, and it takes time to get things done.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and at least opening our eyes to the issue out there and what you all are doing to try to alleviate some of the pressure on a lot of people, even if they don't know that that it's there, quite honestly. And please keep us updated on where things go from here.
Anita, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Same to you. Same to you. It's 1:16, everyone. It is a busy day, so give us 2 minutes and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, it's a 1:18 right now, and one of the big conversations this week has been about what the future looks like for the roadways here in the city of Chicago. Everyone was kind of looking for, hearing about Waymo vehicles in parking garages, going on the hunt, trying to find them, trying to get pictures, whether it's the news or influencers or whomever, to start this discussion about Waymo in the Windy City. And there are so many different angles to discuss when it comes to it. So I want to bring in Aaron Daughtry, who is with Mothers Against Drunk Driving Illinois, because I think that is a very interesting voice to have in this overall discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Anita.
There's this idea that, okay, with autonomous vehicles, there's a little bit of fear of the unknown, I think, for many of us. But when you speak with representatives from many of the companies behind them, they'll say, yeah, it might feel awkward the first time you get in one of them, but statistics would show that the technology might be safer than, say, a human being and human error. What are your thoughts on this move of Waymo coming here to the city?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, MAD supports the safe deployment and development of autonomous technologies like what is in Waymo cars. It has proven this type of technology to prevent impaired driving. And so they align with our mission. Advanced vehicle technologies, including autonomous technology, but also anti-drunk driving technology that we're pushing to be built into every new human-driven vehicle are really the key pillar of MAD's mission to end impaired driving for good.
Yeah, I mean, if it's an autonomous vehicle, it can't be someone who's had too much behind the wheel. I guess maybe the other side of that would be a fear that somebody who has had too much can an autonomous vehicle detect that danger is near and keep you safe if somebody has had too much and is veering toward you.
Absolutely. And, every day, 34 people are killed in drunk driving crashes, and that's more than 12,000 people per year. So this severity of this crisis really requires innovative solutions like this type of technology.
That is an interesting perspective. And, I was in Austin just a few months ago and they were all over the place. I mean, every intersection I looked at, I saw one, two, or more of these vehicles. So do you think, Austin is a very different landscape than Chicago. Do you think they fit the city of Chicago?
I mean, as they're starting out right now, they're using like manual drivers being part of it. So I think they'll navigate. They're mapping out the roads and what that looks like, and they'll navigate that to the best of their ability to understand that better and make sure that it's safe. But like I said, the technology is really the most valuable piece of equipment and tool in our toolkit to end impaired driving altogether. So what that technology looks like, I mean, we have been pushing, for example, our HALT law, which actually requires anti-drunk driving technology to be placed in all new cars on the road. And that has proven to save more than 10,000 lives per year. So, this technology in similar alignment would obviously help reach that goal.
It is pretty wild to me that we're still in 2026 with so many different options for people. I mean, whether it's just a simple, let's just talk about what is in the city. Whether it's a simple taxi cab, whether it's a ride share, possibly these Waymo vehicles at some point in time. There are so many options, and yet when we do see a DUI, it does make you scratch your head.
It does. And what we find is that road violence is truly caused by both human choice and human error. It claims thousands of lives annually, and it leaves countless others with permanent physical, psychological, emotional damage. And so, when we think about what is the next step, it is truly this technology, because people are still making those decisions to get behind the wheel. And when you're impaired, you're not making the best choices, right? So, this creates an opportunity it kind of eliminates the choice when you're getting into a vehicle that is not being driven by someone impaired.
So I want to talk about a couple of things when it comes to what you're seeing. One, I would like an overview of what you are seeing in terms of drunk driving in 2026, or if you're able to have, if you've already looked over some data from 2025, what are we seeing as a trend? What are the numbers showing you at this point in time?
Yeah, unfortunately, since 2019, impaired driving deaths have increased by 22%.
Wow.
So it's continuing to be a crisis across the country, and certainly in major cities like Chicago. So, but like I said, there's the technology, there is a solution to it. It's been proven this technology does help eliminate that. So I think, as MAD would encourage anyone that's, going out and enjoying or celebrating using alcohol or any other substances, that we just encourage everyone to make a plan. And what that entails is, finding a ride share, taking a Waymo, whatever that looks like, to find a safe ride home for yourself and planning ahead before you, become intoxicated in any way.
And then I would love to know if you all have already, and it seems like you've done your research on Waymo, and so do you all have some data that shows the difference Waymo in certain cities that have adopted it have made when it comes to DUIs?
I don't have that yet. Like I said, we have the data on the overall technology, and that it has been proven to save 10,000 lives per year. But I don't have specific data on Waymo individually.
Yeah, I would just be interested to see, like I mentioned, being in a city not too long ago, this was December, where they were all over the place. And I would really be interested to know, okay, if you've had it for a year, did it cut down DUIs by 5%? Did it cut them down by 50% before other cities are adopting them? I think that would be really important information to have as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's certainly something that, Matt, as we, continue to navigate our relationship with Waymo to kind of find out what that is and be able to see if that technology is, continuing to help decrease the cause of death and injury over time.
What are you all seeing is possibly, or what do you feel is possibly behind the 22% increase from 2019 until now?
I mean, I think naturally, as people celebrate more, coming out of COVID certainly, and people kind of reuniting in person and things like that, I'm sure kind of just reiterated the importance of trying to get home safe and sound. And I think that people were not as careful. But it's a growing issue because there's increased use of cannabis now. So intoxicated driving isn't just mean alcohol; it also includes drugs and other substances. So there's just a natural increase that's growing over time.
It is. Obviously, there's a lot more studying that needs to be done. I mean, they're already on the roads in a lot of places. They're already here in the city, although, as you mentioned, there are drivers behind the wheel right now. They said that they're kind of navigating the system with the drivers first before it's autonomous. So all of that information will be loaded in the system. But, as we advance, there's just so many different things to look at here. It is interesting to look at it from the perspective, again, of a difference of drunk or impaired or distracted drivers, and kind of what we'll see change in time with more of these out on the roadways. Is there anything that gives you concern, it gives you a pause right now when it comes to these Waymos?
I mean, at this time, I can't really speak to that. I've not tested one myself, but because we know that the technology works, we're confident that with the safe deployment, it has every opportunity to decrease impaired driving across the country.
Okay. All right. Well, we will continue this conversation for sure. Thank you so much for weighing in. I appreciate it, and I value you all's perspective there at MAD. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Anita. We appreciate it.
Take care. Everybody, it's 1:28. Want to take you back out to Washington, D.C. as we go to break here. There is a moment today, as I mentioned off the top of our broadcast, that you're seeing former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and then former President Bill Clinton, who will be testifying before Congress. And there are Democrats outside of the courthouse right now who are speaking on the Secretary of State's behalf and speaking to the moment that we are in right now. We're going to listen to this for just a moment before we go to break. This is in New York, New York.
Make this deposition and her hearing public, because the reality is we're talking to the wrong person today. Who we should be talking to instead are people who are actually mentioned in the files, people who have made misleading statements about their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Earlier today, Chairman Comer mentioned being open to talking to Secretary Lutnick. Well, let's get him in. Let's talk to Secretary Lutnick instead. Let's talk to someone who is neighbors with Jeffrey Epstein, who actually associated with Jeffrey Epstein, not someone who had never, ever met Jeffrey Epstein to their knowledge. And so let's try to talk about people who will help us with our investigation, And let's release the 2.5 million files so we can know who else to talk to and so we can do right by the victims and actually bring justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari, representing Arizona's 3rd District. I am extremely appalled by the Republican chairman's behavior today and by the behavior of the entire committee and how unserious they are about this investigation. Let's remind the country about what we are actually talking about. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and a list of many rich and powerful people from around the United States and around the world abused and raped more than 1,000 people who were children, many of whom were children at the time. And today we are sitting through an incredibly unserious clown show of a deposition where members of Congress and the Republican Party are more concerned about getting their photo op of Secretary Clinton than actually getting to the truth and holding anyone accountable. I also want to talk about the reporting from this week and the fact that we now know that the Department of Justice, in their ongoing cover-up, the most egregious cover-up in American history, intentionally seem to have redacted more or withheld more than 50 pages of allegations from a minor against President Trump. Do not forget that Kash Patel went in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee and said under oath that the FBI had no credible allegations of any other people being involved in this child sex trafficking operation. These documents that the Department of Justice intentionally has withheld from the American public in regard to the allegations against President Trump came from the FBI. The FBI had interviewed this witness 4 times. You do not do that if it is not serious. So Kash Patel needs to be immediately brought back before the Oversight Committee. He needs to answer these questions again, and we need answers immediately. Again, America is watching. Young people in this country are watching to see if powerful people will continue to protect other powerful people and whether or not Congress will actually hold these perpetrators accountable. Thank you.
And as a former prosecutor, I've been involved in leading investigations in serious offenses, and this ain't it. What we're seeing is political theater. What we're seeing is folks that are looking for headlines and tweets as opposed to doing the business of going about getting justice for the victims in this case, and survivors in this case, I should say, as well. And I think that that's what I think some of our friends on the other side are losing sight of, is that we are here to make certain that justice is served, and it's important for us and as oversight members to do our job to ensure that all the evidence, any information is heard, and that any victims, any survivors' voices are heard as well. And that
Welcome back, everyone. It's 1:35 right now, and we've seen this in several different localities, little by little, but now Elgin is moving to ban single-use plastic bags at major retailers. It's a huge move, and Kristen Ifner is joining me now. She is a sustainability manager in Elgin. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about getting to this point. How did we get here?
Sure, good question. This topic has been discussed by Elgin community members for over 10 years now. So this is nothing new. Community members saw there was a issue with plastics getting into our environment. They saw this as a public health issue, a safety issue. And so after a lot of discussion, research, and looking at best practices, back in 23, they brought a recommendation to council. They received feedback and they have made updates, but they brought forth a recommendation to for council to consider a plastic bag ban.
Mm-hmm. And so if it's advanced at least this week, and then March 11th is the next big date for this. Tell me what happens then.
Correct. So on March 11th, council will discuss this ordinance for final approval. If this does move forward, then this would go into effect on June 2027. Between approval and the effective date, we would be working to educate the community and just help community members, residents, businesses prepare for this change.
Yeah, you mentioned, educating the community. Thus far, does it seem like the community is behind this move?
Yes, again, this has been in discussion for over 10 years now, and so there's many community members that are very excited to see this advance for potential approval. We do recognize there are some concerns around the ordinance, particularly around how this is going to affect consumers, concerns around equity. But yeah, there is overall excitement from the community and seeing this move forward.
Explain that a little bit more to me in terms of the concerns. What do they mean by concerns about equity or concerns for the consumer?
Sure. So just if we're looking at the current economy in general, there, as a consumer, and I can say for myself, you can feel that prices have been increasing recently. And so there's just concerns if we're banning, so this ordinance, they ban plastic bags, but there's also a 10-cent fee on paper to try to encourage residents to bring in reusable bags. Just with this fee, there's concern on how that's just an additional cost for residents. And then just equities concerns on how that's going to impact the community.
And so it's for someone who maybe that 10 cents could add up quickly for them if they didn't have much money to begin with. I could see that. But you all are trying to address that aspect of it for people who may be on SNAP or some other type of benefits.
Correct. In the ordinance, there are exemptions. One is for if a shopper is enrolled in WIC or SNAP or a similar government food assistance program, they will be exempt from the fee. Another option is for any shopper, they can bring in a reusable bag, and they will also, that's another way to avoid the fee.
And speaking of exemptions, from a retail perspective, who would be exempt to this, or where would we see this adopted?
Sure. So this ordinance applies to mainly our large retail establishments. For Elgin, that is about 42 retailers. This does exempt, or it doesn't include gas stations, restaurants, and it also excludes small businesses. So that's like your pop-up shops, your smaller entrepreneurs. And the ordinance, this defines, or small retailers are defined as those with 12 or fewer locations in the state and employ 250 or fewer full-time employees in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you why you think it's taken 10 years to even get this far.
I think it's a pretty contentious issue. There's a lot of considerations that go into this. And I think there's just a lot of thought in how Elgin as a community can reduce waste. This was one solution brought forward in discussion. Discussion didn't, just discussion looking at other alternatives. This did seem like the best way to reduce waste for Elgin and for Elgin to be a leader in climate action.
And just on a final note, what type of impact do we expect this to make? What kind of change have you all looked at a quantitative look at this? What kind of change we anticipate this single decision making?
Yes. So, and just looking at how similar ordinances have impacted other communities in other states, results show this does have a significant impact in reducing plastic waste in communities. During Elgin's planning process, I did reach out to other communities in the Chicago region, and they did also report seeing a significant reduce in plastic waste. So we anticipate a similar result for Elgin.
Okay, well, we'll be looking again, and we'll be listening in on March 11th. Please continue to let us know how things go from here.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care. It's 1:41, everyone. And as I was speaking to the sustainability manager there in Elgin, Brad Schneider began speaking. He is the new Democrat Coalition chair, and we're going to find out a little bit more about what they are doing and their outlook moving forward. Let's listen in.
Exactly what the largest coalition in the majority is standing for once we win the majority, once we win this election.
Bounce up with Max's question. Right now, there are basically in every open primary in a safe blue seat, there's at least one candidate running to the left of the retiring incumbent. Pretty much every swing district has at least one progressive candidate running. Dozens of incumbents are being primaried to the left right now. We've seen over and over again example of grassroots activists saying they want Dems to be fighters, they want you guys to tear up the rule book. How do you convince your voters of the relevance of a center-left, pragmatic, bipartisan group of lawmakers at a time when voters, at least some of your voters, are saying, we want you guys to be more like the Republicans. And every candidate, by the way, is running as the outsider, the fighter, the not a politician. What's going to be your response to this new wave?
So Andrew, what you just described is the vibrant democracy that all of us should be celebrating, where you have people of varying ideas across the political spectrum debating those ideas in the public square. That's what defined our country at its beginning, and it's what's given our country great strength. We welcome that. And as I mentioned, we have already endorsed 9 candidates, new Dem candidates in the coming election. We'll have several more coming forward. And we believe those are the candidates who have the background, bring the ideas, and will win the elections that will put Democrats in the majority, make Hakeem Jeffries our speaker, and provide the United States as a whole the government that I think so many of us aspire to, one where experience is valued, where it's not just credibility but capability and competence matters, and that we are addressing the challenges and moving towards the opportunities for the country. So we welcome the debate, and I think you'll see the new Dem candidates, both our members, our 115 members, and the ones that we're bringing on into the fold are the ones who are going to carry the message. Let's go to Nikki.
I just wanted to add, I think for my Democratic primary voters and my general election voters, I think they all do want the same thing ultimately, which is a government that works for them again and delivers results. I think that means standing up to this administration, but I also think it means putting forward policies that are going to make their lives better. And that's, to me, why I'm a new Dem, because I believe that our plans are actionable. We want a big blowout on election night where Hakeem has a 30-seat, a 40-seat majority. But in the reality of it maybe not being that big, we're going to be operating potentially with a more slimmer majority. And we still want to get these things done. A lot of these are ideas and legislation that we have that have been bipartisan. And so I think that's why I go back to What I am banking on in my election is that people are going to come down fundamentally on, I want her to go to Washington and accomplish something for us. And I think that's what's going to carry the day.
So I came to Congress, red to blue, and then I was frontline last term with Nikki. And I would challenge anybody to say this is not a bold agenda. Adding 4 million homes across the United States is a bold agenda, and I will go toe to.
Okay, so we were listening in there to, again, this new Democrat coalition. It is chaired by our own Congressman Brad Schneider, and there are about 115 members of this coalition as they're speaking. I mean, it's not a new coalition. I mean, it goes back to 1997, but there is more of a conversation now, especially about this coalition, because there are many people in the country who believe that either right or left, both sides have gone a little too far to the right or left. And so this is the coalition, one of the coalitions that's trying to bring people a little bit back to the center. This is a center-left coalition, and they're talking about the candidates that they've endorsed in this current election cycle, 9 candidates that they have endorsed in this current election cycle, as they are built on 3 pillars. This is economic growth and opportunity, healthy and safe communities, and strong national security and defense. They want to look at politics from a bipartisan lens and be able to reach across the aisle more often. But again, that takes people on both sides coming back a little bit closer to the middle, and they say that that is what they represent. So again, just listening to a bit of their conversation there. It is 1:46, though. Our next guest is on the line. So let's take a 2-minute break, and we'll be right back. All right, it's 1:49 right now, and this is not what you want to hear. Chicago has gotten another credit downgrade. So let's talk about what this means, what it is, with Linda Vanderpeer. She's a managing director in KBRA's Public Finance Ratings Group. Thank you for joining me to kind of flesh this all out. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Anita.
This isn't the first time that we've had a credit downgrade just within the last few years. So tell me what that means for the city, and when was the last time you can recall us getting a credit downgrade?
Well, KBRA downgraded the city yesterday, and we did so because its financial flexibility has weakened. Specifically, we're seeing a deterioration in the fund balance, narrower liquidity, very high and rising fixed costs, especially pension costs and debt service costs. So the last time that KBRA made a change to the rating was in May of last year, where we put the rating on a negative outlook. We had formerly rated the GO credit, the general obligation credit, at A- with a negative outlook, and we made the downgrade, as I mentioned yesterday, to BBB plus, and kept the negative outlook on.
What kind of difference does that make for citizens? I mean, if they're hearing that, like, what does it mean for me?
Well, the negative outlook and the downgrade basically mean that the city's financial position is just tighter. It did manage to close its 1.19 billion corporate fund shortfall, but in doing so, it relied heavily on a mix of one-time measures, new and in some cases untested revenue sources, as well as borrowing to pay for costs that are not capital in nature. That's something that KBRA and other rating agencies consider not a best practice for municipal issuers like the city. So what it means for a taxpayer is likely to be higher borrowing costs when the city goes out to sell its general obligation bonds to finance capital projects. Those higher interest costs are spread over a relatively long term. This doesn't mean that the city's in any kind of financial crisis yet, but it does mean that our downgrade and the negative outlook mean that we consider the city to be operating with a very limited margin for error. There's essentially no unassigned general fund balance at this point. Liquidity is very narrowed. We calculate that the number of days of city cash on hand has declined to only about 43 days as of year end 2024, when the last available information was provided. It's probably even tighter since then due to the delay in the receipt of property taxes from Cook County. So liquidity is constrained. Fund balance is constrained. It's not a collapse scenario. It's really more a story about eroding flexibility and rising risk.
And does it surprise you that, I mean, this was such a big issue during the last budget cycle of trying to avoid this downgrade, and now we get the downgrade? Does it surprise you that the finger pointing has begun, that the blame game has begun?
We feel it's unfortunate that the blame game has begun. We noted the acrimony in the budget process between the administration and city council, and that we didn't feel that bodes favorably for future budget negotiations, which are likely to be even more fraught because, as I mentioned, there just does not seem to be the willingness to consider the types of recurring revenue sources that are needed to address structural budget imbalance. So this budget was ultimately balanced, but balanced from a technical perspective only, and that is different than structural budget balance. And on the expenditure side, there also does not seem to be much flexibility at all to navigate around the edges because fixed costs are so high, about 32 to 33% of the overall corporate fund expenditure budget. So that means that the city just doesn't have a lot of flexibility to reduce those costs.
And if we are looking at other comparable major cities, what do we look like compared to them?
Well, it's really difficult to compare one large city to another because the funding responsibilities of cities are so divergent. But what I will say is that for a long time, I think it's been, widely understood that Chicago's pension funding crisis, I'll call it, is really a precipitating factor. Unlike New York or Los Angeles, where their pension funds are close to fully funded, Chicago's 4 pension funds are only funded at about 25% of the total liability. That's an extremely low level. And while the city has worked very hard to stabilize that net pension liability and sort of climb that statutory funding ramp, which already requires a contribution of about $2.5 billion per year, and the city has now made 4 or will make 4 consecutive advanced pension contributions once it does the full amount for this year, which it's dividing into 2 tranches. So it is working to address that, but really the challenge is sustainability at this point. Prior contributions, at least the advanced contributions that were made to help the city get back onto its sort of pension funding ramp, were made with federal funds from the pandemic, and those monies have dried up. So next year, the amount of the advanced contribution that is scheduled will go up even more because of the Illinois Public Safety Tier 2 Adjustment Act. And we're just questioning where that money is going to come from.
So
I would say the greatest difference is pensions between Chicago and other cities that we rate.
And you pointed out some very significant things, just even from that particular standpoint of pensions. Also mentioning the pandemic funds that are now, gone by the wayside. So let me ask you this. What I'm hearing is that things are escalating. Is there a way to turn this around, or do we continue to get downgraded?
Yeah, I think that there certainly a way to turn this around. We have a negative outlook because we're watching whether the city can really implement durable revenue enhancements and spending reforms. We're watching to see whether it can sustain the advanced pension contributions without exhausting its liquidity situation. And we're also watching to see whether it will be able to moderate its additional borrowing and maintain borrowing for capital purposes instead of using debt to fund operations, as it has or will be doing in this case, when it uses about $450 million of debt to fund retro payments to fire and EMT, as well as settlements and judgments. Our view is that the city's ability to accomplish these goals is increasingly constrained, but basically, we note in our report that Chicago remains really one of the most economically important cities in the country. Right now, it's operating with thin reserves, rising pension costs, rising personnel costs, reliance on one-time solutions. And I think the path forward, as has been the case, for many years, really depends on whether they can implement durable structural reform where recurring revenue can be matched with recurring expenditures.
Okay, a couple more questions and I'm going to let you go. But everything that you just pointed to there, if you were talking about a person or you were talking about a business, somebody would probably be talking about bankruptcy. And, at least the Chapter 11 where you could maybe just restructure things and then come out okay in some time. What happens for a city if you get to that point?
Well, under current Illinois law, Chicago is not authorized to file for bankruptcy under Chapter 9, which is what municipalities would file under Chapter 9. There has been legislation that's been introduced from time to time, but there is presently no statutory authority that would permit the city to file. So bankruptcy is not our base case in our ratings rationale, but I think that's how we would answer the question at this point. It's not a situation where we anticipate the city filing for bankruptcy. It's more a situation where we would anticipate mid-year budget adjustments that will be difficult to accomplish.
Yeah. And when you speak of structural versus non-structural solutions, like what are structural solutions? Like give us some actual things.
Sure. Well, for example, a property tax would have been a structural solution, and one that is, well tested, and generates a meaningful amount of money. A head tax would also have been a structural solution. And in fact, in the fiscal 26 budget, which did pass, there were about 398 million of structural solutions. So it's about a third of the budget that passed that did in fact include structural solutions, even something as minor as, let's say, the yacht tax. That's a structural solution, or the bag tax, because it's recurring. Some of the proposals, however, for example, I'll point out the amount. It's about 150 million that is going to go to close the fiscal 2026 deficit that came from the sweep of TIF surplus. This was a record sweep. While the TIF surplus will still be around, there will be a recurring TIF surplus. It's highly unlikely that next year's will be as high as this year's. So that's really what I think we would not consider to be structural. Similarly, anything that's one time, like the proposed asset sales, of delinquent city receivables, that's a one-time thing.
Very interesting stuff, concerning stuff. Now, do you primarily focus on Chicago? Is that how you're so, steeped in knowledge about what's going on here?
No, actually, I primarily focus, though, on local government credits. So I do cover other cities as well as Chicago, other large cities.
Okay. All right. Well, this is very interesting. I mean, just from the standpoint of, being in this moment, but also how in the world this gets changed. I can just feel pressure rising from people listening to that in the city of Chicago, thinking there's so many taxes already. If taxes are the answer, like, just I can feel some blood pressure rising, more than my own. But anyway, thank you so much for being here and walking us through, what all of this means. I think, a lot of people hear the credit got downrated, and it just, they're words. So having some actual meat behind that to know how much of a situation the city is in and what turning that around actually looks like is really important.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Goodness. I mean, the possibility of more taxes in the city, but if that is what it takes to turn things around, I mean, if you've just had 2 credit downgrades, is this the direction we want to keep going? I mean, these are the questions that have to be asked, and at some point in time, there have to be some very tough, well, every time we have a budget season, obviously there are tough conversations, arguments, but it looks like they're in for another one, as she said, that when it comes back around, there are going to be even tougher discussions to be had about how to dig ourselves out of the situation that we're in right now. Never want to hear about credit downgrades, and especially continual credit downgrades. It's 2:03 right now. Let's take a quick break, and then I'll set you up for what you can expect in this hour. All right, everybody, it's about 2:06 right now. Let me tell you a little bit about where we're going in this hour. We're going to talk with one of our meteorologists about the weather outside. It's been a pretty beautiful day. I mean, the sun was out a little bit more earlier today than it is right now. I'm seeing a little bit more cloud cover than we did earlier. You know, you can look at this picture of the bean, no sunshine. But a lot of folks out there kind of soaking in at least the dry weather that we have out there, and that is the key word, words, you know, as we go into the weekend. How long are we going to be dry? Because there is some precipitation on the way, and we're going to talk about the form and how long before we can see it coming up before we get out of here this hour, hopefully. Also, we look forward to having a discussion, a really important one, about CTA and Metra suspensions. There's some new data out that's a little disturbing, and so we'll walk through it and get more context to the numbers that we're seeing there. And also the same kind of goes for the conversation we're going to have with a doctor about ADHD and the role of nutrition in regulating responses. That should be a very interesting discussion as well. Now, probably in about 10 to 15 minutes or so, we've had many discussions about construction on I-80. We always love to say there's winter and then construction season. And obviously, before you get to enjoy the roadways, construction really just gives everyone a headache. But this particular area on I-80 is getting a lot of conversation. So we're going to talk to IDOT about that. We do know that Dr. Willie Wilson is having an event during this hour. Possibly we'll be able to take you there live. We'll see if we are able to. But I got to have this conversation that I'm sorry, especially after us just having a discussion about Chicago's credit downgrade to have, honestly, next, because you're going to think, like, what is going on? But we have to talk about business license fees. They've increased, and for some businesses, it's gone up by as much as 400%. How can you survive? Elliot Richardson, the president and co-founder of Small Business Advocacy Council, is joining me now. Thank you for your time.
Hey, Anita, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, this is a really interesting conversation to have after the one that you just did.
Yeah. What was your thoughts as we were listening to Linda Vanderpeer?
Look, there are a lot of issues that are facing the city of Chicago from a fiscal perspective. And the budget process, if folks followed that, it was extraordinarily messy. It was different. And unfortunately, one of the things that came out of that budget debate was dramatically higher licensing fees and higher fines for the smallest businesses, the local businesses in the city of Chicago. So that's a problem. Regulated business licenses, that's one type of license. Those went up from $250 to $1,000. Limited business licenses like your bookstore, your clothing store, those went up from $250 to $500. Those have to be renewed every 2 years. Other fees were dramatically increased. And just with everything facing the small business community right now, you know, in Chicago, from tariffs to immigration issues to all of the things that have been going on, it seems like a really terrible time to so significantly increase the cost of just doing business in our city.
Mm-hmm. And yet, listening to her, you think, what is the option? I mean, that we all kind of fall to our knees. She's saying, well, you're going to have higher property taxes, or you're going to have something that's continual in order to dig out of this situation in terms of the credit downgrade, this financial constraint on the city, which means the reins will be tightened on everyone, essentially.
They're going to have to get very creative on how to deal with this particular situation. But, you know, over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of mandates that have come down on small businesses. And let's define that. I mean, that is your small restaurant. That is your small coffee shop or retailer. So they've seen all of these new requirements that have come down on them. And now you're raising fees. So, you know, one way to try to tackle this is to grow our way out of the budget issues that are impacting the city of Chicago. And certainly everything needs to be looked at. But I think what small businesses get really concerned about is when all else fails, hit the small business owner. And those are the folks that are supporting local communities. They're creating local jobs. And that just seemed to happen during this budget cycle. And I think small businesses want to support the city of Chicago. They definitely want to pay their fair share. But these dramatic increases, they really kind of came out of nowhere in terms of they started during the budget process. And now folks are paying a lot more, again, just for a license to do business.
Yeah, and small businesses truly are the economic engine, for our economy. But there's only so much anyone can take. So, as an advocate, I mean, what are you hearing? Like, what type of emotion are you hearing from some of these small business owners who are talking to you about what they are going through? You mentioned the tariffs. I mean, did they have a sigh of relief from the justice's decision and then say like, oh, actually, no, because the very next day there were new tariffs that were in place. Even from that perspective, they're kind of like things coming from a lot of different angles at them.
Well, I mean, look, let's talk about the licenses for a second and then go to the tariffs and everything else. We can't turn back the clock. So ultimately, if these licensing fees have been raised, what small businesses would like to see, what advocates would like to see is let's improve the permitting process in the city of Chicago. Let's improve the licensing process. Let's make sure the money that's raised through higher fees goes to properly staff the departments and to make things run quicker. Let's improve technology. That could be a positive. Although certainly the fees are not positive, that's something that could help small businesses. A less complicated, faster process, because time is money for a small business owner. Oh, the tariffs, I mean, we could talk about that for such a long period of time. The roller coaster that small businesses have been on throughout this entire tariff, the tariffs going up, the tariffs going down. Nobody really knows what's happening day to day. Small businesses need certainty. And the situation with tariffs has been the furthest from certain. So, yeah, I think when the Supreme Court decision came down, there was a sigh of relief. And then as soon as that happened, it was, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Nowhere near certainty at this point in time for small business owners. And are you seeing, as somebody who represents so many, are you seeing some that just say, I can't take it?
I think small businesses are struggling, and I think that they're facing a lot of challenges, as we've said, and certainly some businesses have closed. Some businesses have moved outside of the city of Chicago, but I think small business owners are full of grit. They're full of fight. They care about their employees. They want to persevere. So I think, they're going to keep moving and keep going. And what we hope is that they can be supported by politicians and by policymakers, because as you said, they are the engine that drive the economy.
Yeah, and what is the message they are sending in terms of some things that they would like to see to help them? Were there some proposals during that budget battle that that they saw as possibly helping them?
Anita, we have a slew of proposals to cut red tape. So, one of the things that we want to see is the debt check process be dramatically dramatically improved, so that businesses that owe very small debts that they might not even know about are able to open without being hindered. We really are looking for the city to cut red tape on zoning, to cut red tape on licensing, so that they're able to move much more quickly. So we think that removing unnecessary barriers, improving technology, cutting red tape is something that businesses across our city are looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. Well, as has been stated twice now, it does seem like the next budget battle might be even more hectic than the last one. So we'll see where these proposals go. For sure, it hurts my heart anytime I see a business that, somebody put everything into, did their very best to keep open. When that closes, it hurts my heart. It should hurt all of our hearts because, again, they add so much to all of our neighborhoods. So we'll see if you get the help you need.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to talk about how important small businesses are and how we can improve the business climate for them.
Thank you so much for your time. It's 2:16 right now, everybody. Give us 2 minutes and we'll be back with the discussion. Hopefully, where we're going from here is the Illinois Department of Transportation, because they're going to be talking about I-80 reconstruction. Welcome back, everyone. It's 2:18 right now. I want to take you to the roadways. We always talk about, the pain that comes with progress, essentially, when it comes to our roadways and construction. In particular, I-80 through Joliet and Will County carries approximately 80,000 vehicles a day. And so this is a major thoroughfare that we've got to get an update on from Phil Gibson. He is an IDOT senior resident engineer. Thank you so much for your time and being here on the show.
Good afternoon.
So many people are interested in this. I've seen quite a bit of discussion on it, a lot of heavy congestion that has been there for a long time. Tell me about the reconstruction project, the impact that that's expected to make.
Okay, so the 16-mile I-80 corridor, it's a $1.3 billion project. It's a key component of the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program. We're about 3 years into it right now. Like you said, the roadways, it's critical for the area, critical for the nation. It carries over 80,000 vehicles a day. We're about 3 years into it right now, and we are on schedule and on budget. We expect to be significantly complete with all the mainline reconstruction in 2028.
2028. So we have a ways to go. Tell me about just, again, the pain that might come with getting to that point. Like, what is the workaround? What are people enduring right now to get to 2028?
So in general, the pain hasn't been too terrible. I mean, I understand you could ask other people, they might disagree, but part of this corridor, we've maintained 2 lanes in each direction, and we've done a lot to try to manage the traffic, manage the flow, and make sure that everybody can get where they need to go. So far, we've got about 80% of the corridor is running on new pavement, which is really helping us out because it helps us with the maintenance of the old deteriorated pavement. We've got pretty significant, we have a smart work zone system that helps notify people of backups. We have a service patrol program where we have tow trucks that are helping motorists. So we're doing everything that we can to maintain the traffic. And as we come into the next 2 years, we'll be shrinking down the work zone. focusing on the Des Plaines River Bridge area.
Okay, around that area. Now, tell me about, before doing this work, what things were like there. Like, what were things like from your perspective in that area?
So the existing I-80 eastbound westbound truss bridges, they were built in 1964. The rest of the interstate through this area was built in 1964. It all performed very well, but it was definitely ready for updates. The new construction is helping. We're going to be adding lanes. We're going to be adding auxiliary lanes, improving all the interchanges. The existing roadway was definitely, it had done its job. It was at capacity, and we're seeing that we've made a lot of improvements.
It had done its job. I like how you said that. It served us well over time.
We appreciate it.
When was the last significant work done out there?
We've had numerous resurfacing and patching jobs. This project has been on the books for a very long time. It's been in development for a very long time. And when Rebuild Illinois came through, it released a lot of extra money that allowed us to advance this very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I want to ask you a couple of things. So what has been the financial commitment to this project?
So like I said, it's a $1.3 billion project that covers the roadway, the bridges, the structures, the interchange improvements, and everything going through this area for the 16 miles.
Mm-hmm. And then as a result of the overall, the statewide funds that have been allocated to these different projects, what are some other priorities?
Outside of the corridor, I can't really speak to that. Oh. My focus is the I-80 corridor right now.
Okay. All right. Listen, I'm always looking for breaking news. So if we could talk about the rest, that'd be great. But I understand and I respect if you can't get in to the other projects here. But what do you say about, getting to the point where we're able to do this type of work? I mean, it is a process to get to a point where statewide funds go to so much infrastructure upgrading.
Yeah, so obviously it's been a very long process for development. There's a lot of coordination that has to be done. We've worked very closely with our partners, with the City of Joliet, Village of Rockdale, the county, other entities that are along the corridor. A lot of coordination with Army Corps of Engineers, coordination with the Coast Guard, coordination with 3 railroads that are passing through. So it's never as easy as it looks. There's always a lot of steps and a lot of hoops to jump through. But it's all come together very well right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you're in phase 3 or are you in phase 2?
It depends on how you want to break it up. I mean, in general, that we're entering pretty much the third and final phase. We started out with advanced work out at either end of the corridor, and then we've been working our way in towards the middle, which is the most complex, and it's sort of the capstone area of the project.
This is the most complex. So walk me through, I mean, you said 2028, like what happens between now and 2028 if you all are so far along already?
So for the last 2 years, we've been working on the areas outside of Des Plaines River Bridge. So from Ridge Road in Minooka to Center Street in Joliet, and from about Briggs in Joliet to New Lenox for Route 30. Those areas, we've reconstructed that pavement in most of that area. West of I-55, we've fully reconstructed the pavement. Between Center Street and I-55, we're halfway done reconstructing the pavement, but we have all the traffic shifted onto the new pavement. We've started the land acquisition in the Des Plaines River area. And then coming up last December, we started work at the Center Street interchange. And starting next month, we'll be starting work at the Chicago Street interchange. Okay,
and you've mentioned the bridge several times. I've heard not so good things about the bridge. So ease people's minds about the bridge going forward once this work is done.
So going forward, once the work is complete, the existing bridges will be gone. Will be on new structures. In the time being, we're inspecting, we're maintaining those. They are safe. We are driving on them. The new bridges will be built to the north, so we're changing the alignment of the roadway through that area, which means that which helps speed the process, because that means that we can construct the new bridges while the traffic is still on the old bridges. That way we don't have to build half of a bridge, take down half a bridge, shift traffic. It's the only way that we're able to complete this by 2028.
Gotcha. Okay. And as a senior resident engineer, senior tells me you've been with IDOT for some time. I would like you to tell me, like, if you're ranking the projects that you've worked on in terms of their level of importance or how complicated they have been that you've worked through, tell me where this ranks.
That's an easy one. By far, this is the top. This has been the most complex. There's the most moving pieces. Entering into this last stage, while we're in the Des Plaines River Bridge area, we've got 3 projects that are overlapping work zones, overlapping traffic control, and all of the work has to be very tightly coordinated in order to make each project come off. I've got a really strong team. I've got a great team of contractors working with me. I've got a really strong team of engineers helping me oversee everything. So we're doing everything we can to keep everything on time and on budget.
Wow. Wow. I mean, you came right out with it. This is it. So I believe you. I mean, it was emphatic. So thank you so much for your work. Thank you for your time and letting us know about this. And we'll definitely be looking for updates. I mean, this is pretty significant for so many people that travel that way.
Yep, we will continue to send out updates as we change staging, as we move traffic. We'll definitely keep everybody updated.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Again, 80,000 vehicles a day. I mean, there's a lot of people who are really waiting for those updates and more importantly, waiting to hear that they are complete. So let's go ahead and take a 2-minute break, everybody, and we're going to move forward with our discussions. Welcome back, everyone. 2:30 right now. And, you know, when it comes to ADHD, much of the conversation surrounds behavior, surrounds resources, and medication. But there is an increasing concern or need for research in the area of nutrition, according to our next guest. Dr. James Greenblatt is a dual board certified psychiatrist who is joining me to talk a little bit about this very important topic. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. It's good to be with you.
So I'm seeing an estimated 7 million American children aged 3 to 17 years old have been diagnosed with ADHD, and over 50% of them are currently taking medication. But you are really interested in the aspect of the deficiency for nutrients and the reaction that can have on a child's system. Tell me more.
Sure. We've been looking at it, and I've been seeing it in my practice for close to 30 years, but we didn't have the research to support some of the things that our parents and grandparents were noticing. Food affects behavior. So my career has been based on looking at nutritional deficiencies of vitamins and minerals that affect behavior, and also looking at some of the food additives like sugar, sweetened beverages, and now all the interest in ultra-processed foods. We absolutely have research to support that they affect behavior in some children.
And when we say affects behavior versus being diagnosed with ADHD, to me that's a wide swath that we're talking about.
Absolutely. Great question. So ADHD is kind of a genetically driven and it has neurobiological changes in the brain. And there are a number of kind of environmental factors that could make the symptoms worse or better. So we know higher rates with the sugar sweetened beverages or ultra processed foods, and deficiencies of certain micronutrients like zinc or magnesium. So these nutritional influence doesn't necessarily cause ADHD, but they make it harder to treat and exacerbate the symptoms.
Oh, that's a very important aspect of the conversation to just reemphasize. There's a big difference between causation versus in dealing with something that's already there and what may make things better as you are progressing through time. Tell me about the difference an ADHD diagnosis can have, first and foremost, on a family, on a child.
To be dramatic, it's profound. I mean, think of an individual, a child who's not doing well in school, being criticized by teachers and parents. It has a dramatic effect on self-esteem, which just lingers. And we have research demonstrating those with ADHD, particularly those untreated, have higher rates of employment problems, relationship problems, financial problems, and potentially addiction to drugs. So untreated ADHD has severe consequences for both children and adults. And what we've been trying to talk about for many years is medication is one treatment, therapy is one treatment, but there's an incredible opportunity to look at nutritional factors as an augmentation to our current treatment model.
When you say you've been looking at it for years, I could see some people hearing this and thinking this may be simplifying or oversimplifying what someone is going through. Have you heard that? And what is your response?
I think no, it's not really oversimplifying. In some ways, it's making a more complex puzzle simpler to understand. So in an evaluation by someone trained in what we call functional medicine or nutritional psychiatry, we do a traditional diagnostic evaluation and then also look at nutritional deficiencies. And not every person with ADHD might have a nutritional deficiency, but those that do, it can dramatically change the course of the illness. So we're not oversimplifying. We're just kind of expanding the toolbox for psychiatrists and mental health clinicians and giving parents just a broader range of choices.
That's huge. Just a broader range of choices for parents, that they can, speak to you or even read one of your books. You have Finally Focused, the Breakthrough Natural Treatment Plan for ADHD that restores attention, minimizes hyperactivity, helps eliminate drug side effects. And then you also have Finally Hopeful, the personalized whole body plan to find and fix the root causes of your depression. We were just having a discussion yesterday with someone, a doctor for the American Heart Association, about how much diet plays into so many health issues or complications that we might face in life.
Well, it's certainly, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. The brain is the most metabolically active organ in the body. So oftentimes we see, psychological symptoms based on either nutritional deficiencies or poor, dietary choices. So our brains are very sensitive to nutritional deficiencies or environmental causes. And again, just like in heart disease and other chronic illnesses, the research has supported this, and it's much easier to kind of talk to colleagues and parents about research, evidence-based protocols.
Mm-hmm. And when you are having those conversations, I'm wondering, some people would hear, okay, have a nutritional imbalance or deficiency, and that just sends you to a drugstore to go get a supplement, versus how you are replenishing those things in your system, maybe through actual food. Can you speak to the difference that you see, whether the things that you are suggesting, the changes that you're suggesting, can they come from a supplement that someone gets off the drugstore shelf versus having to eat your way into that?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. We absolutely have research now demonstrating a healthier diet and less sugar sweetened beverages and ultra processed foods. ADHD behavior gets better. So we know that. But we also know for many of these children and adolescents that to get some of the micronutrients that they might need, particularly magnesium, that is a nutrient that is the most commonly deficient in ADHD, that oftentimes a supplement is needed as well.
And what you name magnesium, what are some of the other nutrients?
Well, the most common researched micronutrients are zinc, being low in ADHD, magnesium, and then what more people are familiar with probably is the omega-3 fatty acids, what's in fish, and number of children with ADHD and other kind of behavioral disorders are low in omega-3 fatty acids.
And so if a parent is listening to this or a caregiver is listening to this, I would love for you to name some of the other foods that need to be introduced, reintroduced, increased in a child's diet that might help with some of these things.
Sure. I mean, the most important thing, which is sometimes the most challenging, is decreasing the sugar and the ultra-processed foods. Easier said as a doctor or as a parent, sometimes challenging for the kids. So increasing more protein is probably the simplest path to help with dietary changes. But the sugar-sweetened beverages are probably the most well-studied and the most concerning in terms of diet. In terms of supplements, the only ones that I would recommend that parents or individuals do on their own would be adding magnesium, adding more fish in the diet, or taking omega-3 supplements. And for most with ADHD would benefit from the zinc supplementation, low-dose zinc supplementation.
So one of the things that you talk about in your book is how these things help eliminate drug side effects. And when it comes to ADHD, many people will tell you they don't want to take the medication because they don't feel like themselves. So how do you speak to that aspect of people's maybe resistance to be on medication for ADHD and looking at this as a particular option?
Sure. It's a really important question. There are so many medications now for ADHD. if someone doesn't feel right, then it's either the wrong medicine or the wrong dose. So that's the most important thing. I don't think anyone should tolerate side effects to medications for ADHD. But some of the side effects that we see are associated with what I've been talking about is magnesium deficiency. So oftentimes we would provide magnesium supplements with the stimulant ADHD medications, and that eliminates some of the anxiety, the irritability that is often associated with the stimulant medications.
Very interesting. In the work that you've done over time, I mean, you've been in this field for so long, do you feel like we are getting better with accepting these things, or in some ways worse, because we are such a microwave society, having whole meals and those types of things aren't necessarily what they used to be?
No, I'm optimistic. Things are getting much better. I think it's easier to talk about diet and health, and there are more choices. It's still a struggle, and in different socioeconomic classes where the ultra processed foods are less expensive and more available. But no, absolutely encouraged, because I've been talking about this for 30 years, but I didn't have the research to support it. And now the academic community is flooding our journals with research supporting how food affects our health, and particularly how diet affects mental health. So that is encouraging.
What are some, when you say how diet affects mental health, I mean, we're talking about ADHD, but when it comes to things regarding our brains, what are some other things that you commonly see that could be affected by better diet?
Well, I think the world of behavioral health and psychiatry now, we've seen every major psychiatric disorder can be affected by diet. There's research at Harvard and Stanford looking at ketogenic diets for schizophrenia and bipolar illness. There are studies looking at Mediterranean diets demonstrating efficacy in depression. So the world has really changed, and the research is supporting those changes.
Very interesting stuff. Thank you so much for your time. And I named, your books. I hope that people who are really looking for some options for themselves may seek them out, and that it, especially for people who, again, don't feel like medication is the route that they feel positively affected by, that this may be something that helps them along the road. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care. It's 2:43, everybody. Give us another 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. It's 2:46, and the next program that we're going to talk about, there's some data coming out that might make you scratch your head, or maybe it won't be as shocking as you think. I'm not sure how you'll take this, but there is a program for mass transit suspensions. Now, this is in large part created to make sure that people that cause disturbances on the CTA, on the Metra, don't have a free pass to keep coming on board. I mean, this is aimed at maybe not seeing situations like we've seen very recently, but over time, where something horrible happens to someone on mass transit, and you're thinking, could this have been prevented? But it also has some drawbacks in it. Ed Yonka with the ACLU is joining me now to talk a little bit more about the details here and the new data that's out. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. It's good to be with you.
Mm-hmm. So on the surface, it seemed like this mass transit suspension program had good intentions for safety. Would you agree?
Yes, because I think, we all know everybody who rides either on Metra or on the CTA wants to feel safe. And so it's important that we provide that kind of safety. I think, what you see here is when the approach to that safety is punishment, is using these suspensions, then there's a need to dig in and look at how that process is working and who is impacted. And that's really the data that the Tribune is reporting on now.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that data, they found in 2024 and 2025, the CTA suspended 40 people via this administrative hearing process, and that 90% were Black, 10% were Hispanic. Well, if you look at the CTA overall, 27% of the CTA's riders are Black. 90% of those who were suspended were Black. How do we get there? That math doesn't seem to math right for me.
It is very typical of what we see, whether we look at traffic stop data in the city of Chicago and elsewhere. It's what we see when we look at data around who gets prosecuted for low-level crimes. It's similar to data we see around, who actually goes to prison, oftentimes even for the same charges, that there is a racial disparity in those numbers. There are two things here, I think, that are really important. First, we ought to applaud the legislature for demanding that the agencies report on this data periodically so that, in fact, we can look at the way that they're using this tool that they have in order to help all of us feel safe when we're on, when we're on mass transit. But the second thing is that this discussion shouldn't stop with simply the reporting of the data. There's a need now to really look at who is being suspended. Are there differences, for example, in who gets, up the ladder to the suspension hearing, depending on race, for the same action or same activity? Are there other tools that could be used to intervene before there? And, I think the overlay of all of this is really an opportunity for the agencies to do a little self-reflection when you look at these kinds of disparities in the way that they're using this authority.
Yeah, I mean, and what you just touched on there is the possibility of a very subjective nature of, calling out what's wrong to be suspended versus another person who can ride for another day.
Correct. And, the question of if someone engages in a behavior, does it make a difference when you look at the numbers, as you indicated? Is there some equation in which being a person of color is viewed as more dangerous because, either to ridership, to leadership, to somebody, a hearing officer, to someone? This is an opportunity to kind of break through that data and look at this and see if, in fact, you're going to use this tool, are you using it in the appropriate way?
Right. And the thing is, there's also an aspect of this where when it comes to the CTA, when it comes to the Metro, we have an unhoused population. We have a population where mental health is a real issue that depend on CTA and Metro either for cover when it's cold or for some type of structure in their lives as well.
I think that's exactly right. One of the things that you think about is that, it is impossible to think about and have this discussion without thinking about the fact that, many of the folks who may be targeted for this particular suspension may be folks who have mental health needs or other social service needs, and is using this tool, this kind of blunt instrument of suspension, really the right thing. And I think that's one of the opportunities here in terms of both agencies going back and looking at this data and looking, trying to dig behind to figure out the reasons we're seeing these disparities, is to see if there aren't maybe other tools that could be brought to bear before we get to the point of these kinds of suspensions, which again seem to fall hardest on people of color.
Mm-hmm. But somebody, I'm sure, will look at this and say, well, that's Chicago and a soft on crime approach.
Yeah, I think those kinds of talking points or that kind of rhetoric is really easy, and we hear it obviously from platforms all over. But I will say that I have more faith in the people of the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois that I recognize two things. Number one, people want to be safe in every neighborhood, in every community, in every situation, whether it's on the bus or the train or just walking their kids in their neighborhood. But at the same time, I think they recognize that these ideas of just being tough, of sounding tough, of declaring that you're going to punish people, that none of that has worked. We've tried all those approaches. What we need to do is have a serious discussion about many of these issues and a serious discussion about what actually makes us safe. And the reality is that we know that, providing additional services, providing additional mental health resources, providing a different, interventions for people before they get to the point of committing crimes actually makes all of us safer. People are smart enough to know that, and I think they will, despite the rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. Because in truth, there are some serious issues that are in society that then put themselves into a very confined space in a train or in a bus setting.
Absolutely. And it reflects again that point that all of us want to be safe in those spaces, and we know that there are these issues. I think one of the things I often think about, and it's the terrible thing, or maybe not so terrible, but it is the reality of having worked on many of these issues for decades, that we often hear whenever there's a proposal for some new punishment or some new harsh penalty, and folks like me say, well, why don't we look at all the issues involved? Policymakers will always often say, well, yes, we should do that, but let's just, for the moment, let's just impose this additional punishment. Sooner or later, we have to actually do the hard work of trying to address the underlying problems and issues that create all of the kinds of circumstances you're talking about across our society, because that's the only way we're going to achieve real public safety.
Yeah, root causes, and that's so important. But then I'm also thinking about the fact that you have the federal government that's threatening to pull funding from the CTA. Is this the time to roll back something that, again, on the surface was meant to create more safety on these trains and buses?
Well, let me say a couple things. First of all, this particular federal government that we have today is not interested in safety they're interested in control. And so I would not take public safety advice from this president, because I just don't think that, other than a few phrases and threats, this is not someone who understands that. I actually think, as we're seeing crime rates, and particularly violent crime rates, falling, this is exactly the time, exactly the moment to really lean into looking at those root causes and look at ways in which we can address those. And again, that is not to say that at some level there isn't a place for a suspension program in mass transit. But the numbers in terms of the disparities of who gets subjected to that suspension simply tells us that we maybe need to look at the way in which that process is being carried out.
Because there is a difference between the stats saying that crime is trending in the right direction versus the feeling, and especially when people see a woman on a train get set on fire.
Yes. But, and I would say a couple things about that. Number one, I think when you have, when you have events and particular horrific events that are sad and tragic, that are played out in the media, that then get repeated time and time again by public officials and elected officials, I think there is a gap between what we're actually seeing and the way people feel. We need to bring those two things closer together. And I think the part of the way to do that is to have a serious conversation about what it is that we're actually experiencing, and a serious discussion about how we can make it even better.
So let me ask you this. I mean, the need may be there in terms of an actual, actually bringing these conversations to fruition. What's happening? What's happening to actually address these different things?
That's a great question. And I think there are two things that are actually happening at the same time, and they're a little disparate. But on the one hand, I think you see policymakers across the country, certainly here in the state of Illinois in many ways, who are working on, providing additional funding for community-based programs that provide both mental health and other services. I think you see efforts at trying to make reforms inside our systems of both law enforcement and the criminal legal system. The problem often is that those things are quiet and they're long term. And then you have, on the other hand, a conversation which is, even as we saw in the State of the Union, which is loud, which has the biggest megaphone in the country, which is brash, and which wants to make you think that if you simply step outside of your home to walk to the corner to get a newspaper or get a quart of milk or do whatever, your life is in danger, when that is not the experience that most of us have in our lives. And so I think that one of the things is, for many of us, is to continue to have this conversation in all of the places that we can, to begin to shift those narratives and make people really think about the way in which they're responding to individual anecdotes as compared to, what they're actually experiencing in their own lives.
Ed Yanko at the ACLU, thank you so much for your time and conversation today. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
All right. Take care. It's 3 o'clock, everyone. Let's take a quick break, and then I'm going to set you up for what you can expect in this final hour of Chicago Live today. Welcome back, everyone. It's 3:03. Welcome to our final hour here on Chicago Live for your Thursday. We have a lot to get to in this hour. I can tell you we are anticipating a special guest before we turn you over to First at 4 as we continue to honor the life and legacy of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. We have made a call for someone to give a bit more perspective as to what it means for the city of Chicago and for this person in especially in where they are today in their career. We also anticipate a conversation about UFOs. Yeah, this has been an increasing conversation. You know, the president now has weighed in on it. The Secretary of Defense has weighed in on it, and there have been more and more conversations as to what's out there and when will we know everything in this age of disclosure. How much will come out? What will we know in the future? All of those things. We're going to talk with an expert who is going to shine a little bit more light on where that conversation is and where he hopes for it to go. Also, there have been more and more calls for greater parental control when it comes to social media, as we have heard about the negative effects on so many of our young people throughout the country, and trying to figure out what is the balance there. You know, how do parents handle young people just wanting to be young people and explore themselves in new ways as they age, you know, and one of those being online, and then social media comes into play, but also protecting them because they are still youth. We're going to talk about Meta and some of the new controls that they are implementing for parents. So that is a discussion you don't want to miss. I believe we may have our own Paris Schutz talk to me about some new information regarding the Bears. You know that this is an important week for that discussion. You know, whether Indiana or Illinois, in both states right now, there's a lot of activity happening, both in front of and well behind the cameras, behind the curtains, behind closed doors, trying to make sure that either you know, location on the state line, over the state line, whether it be Hammond or whether it be Chicago or more likely Arlington Heights, where will the Bears be in years to come? So he's getting some new reporting on that. I believe that both he and Brett Bugance, because it's such a big story today and throughout this week as we come to the close of a legislative session, that the both of them, we have team coverage on this particular aspect today, and that's aside from Cassie Carlson, who is also in Indianapolis right now covering the combine. There's a lot of Bears conversation to be had, so hopefully we'll be able to get into that. But first, you know, this is away from maybe football. I think it maybe more so applies to like basketball. But have you ever sat at a game and there's a lot of activity, of course, but in the midst of all the activity, do you recall all of the squeaks that you hear as the players are going up and down the court? Did you ever, you know, play basketball yourself or have to run those suicides up and down and you just heard all the well, there's a little science behind that, and there's a Harvard professor who even thinks that you can make some beautiful music through it all in the end. Adele Jululi is joining me now. Adele Jululi is joining me. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Where did you even get the idea to research the squeaks of sneakers?
Well, you know, when I first arrived to America, what you do as an immigrant is that you go to sports events, and one of them is basketball. And we're lucky enough to have the Celtics, and it's a great team. So you go there, and I don't know for your listeners, but to me, I couldn't take my ears off of the squeaking. It was omnipresent. And so I wondered, why do basketball shoes squeak? So as an applied physicist, an experimentalist, you go to the lab and you test what's going on. You observe.
Okay.
That's how it started.
So when you're researching gym shoes and the sounds that they make, what does the research tell you?
Okay, so you expect something boring because it's mostly rubber friction, and you expect things to be slow, but in reality, it's violent events that happen several thousand times per second under your shoe. What you see when you look at the frictional interface are these kind of wrinkles that travel at near supersonic speed, and they repeat, repeat, repeat thousands of times per second. When you think about these kind of events that travel at 100 meters per second, so for your listeners, it's about 300 feet per second in American units. It's super fast in comparison with the speed at which you slide. We did not expect this. What you see under the shoe is what you would expect from geophysical phenomena like earthquakes. So basically what we saw are shoe quakes that repeat thousands of times per second.
Shoe quakes. Never
Exactly.
heard that concept before, but you find beauty in what other people might feel is a nuisance.
Yes, in the sense that, okay, this is a very deceptively simple question. Why deceptive is because we learned a great deal just looking at the rubber sliding super fast on a rigid substrate. And basically what we think is it will potentially give us a deeper understanding of earthquakes. That's the hope, at least from a lab point of view.
Really? Wow. That seems like such a leap.
It is a leap, but when you look at these slip pulses, they mirror rupture dynamics, and they share key similarities with B material frictional faults. At least, there are many of these. Its most common type of faults is B material, so mismatch between the two materials. And so what geophysicists see is that you have these kind of slip pulses. What we see is slip pulses, and they travel at the same speed. So basically, it's the same physics. It's just different scales.
Wow. Now, I'm the type of person, when I said, nuisance, I'm the type of person that would love for someone to figure out how to make them quiet. Have you looked into that?
Well, when we first started to work with our industrial collaborators, they also wanted to make shoes that don't squeak. So they wanted to make materials that they can sell to their customers that don't make this kind of squeaking. But by talking to basketball players, they actually need the squeaking to have some kind of spatial awareness.
Oh.
It's another set of eyes, if you want, to see where their opponents are positioned. So I don't know if they would like that. And frankly, it's the soundtrack of the NBA, so it would be a shame to get rid of it.
Okay, all right. I wouldn't have ever thought that, but I'll trust the professionals at that could be something that's actually helpful for them. Never would have thought that. And this high pitched sound, so essentially it could become, you could make like a music score through it.
Correct. So once we understood the fundamental physics behind squeaking, we understood as well how to modulate the frequency, which means that we can make different notes. And what do you do with notes? Well, you can have a graph and you show that you understand it, or you can have some fun and make music. And we decided to play Star Wars.
My goodness. Okay. And just explain to us before I let you go, kind of the methodology behind this. Like, how do you do this research?
It's a great question. And it's like this type of project is like an Hercule Poirot detective work, but from a science point of view, because when you start working on such project, you basically don't know what's going on. And you have to uncover some clues. You have a lot of unexpected twists. We even see lightning under the shoe that provokes this kind of slip pulses to go. So you wouldn't really expect this to play a role. And we didn't expect as well patterns to play a role. So it's a lot of stubbornness, a lot of challenging of our assumptions, and always coming back to the drawing board and just being persevering. Yeah.
Adele, great speaking with you. Or should I say Professor Jaluli, thank you for speaking with me today.
I'm not a professor yet, but
yeah. Okay. All right. Working on that. All right.
All right.
Thanks so much for
Thank
your
you.
time. Yeah, the pretty cool interest there. It's about 3:14, everybody. Give us 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Okay, everybody, it's just about 3:20. Paris Schutz is here to get us up to speed in this very important week for the legislative process and how that's going to impact the decision of where the Bears end up in the future.
And it's changing every hour, so let's frame it this way. You've got two teams on the gridiron, Indiana and Illinois. And today, they both had possession. They both moved the ball significantly. But I think they both still punted because there's still no final decision.
Touchdowns.
No touchdowns, but, just advancement and field position, and we can get into exactly what happened.
Okay, let's go to the Indiana side. What happened in Indiana?
Well, Indiana, this is all fast-tracked. It's all expected. The Senate concurred with the House. It was kind of a formality today, and now they await Governor Mike Braun's signature. He will sign it.
He was eager to sign it.
Either today or tomorrow he's going to sign it, and he was on Pat McAfee's show, a famed Indiana guy and sports blogger, saying that he thinks it's like 50-50 that it's going to come to Indiana. So once he signs it, they're done with that portion of it, but then the Bears still say, well, we're doing our due diligence on the site in Hammond, so they're not going to jump and say, well, we're going to Indiana. But then on the Illinois side, they finally came to an agreement on a piece of legislation called the Mega Projects Bill. It doesn't mention the words Bears in there, just for mega projects, the size of what the Bears are trying to do.
Well, and for Indiana, it's like Stadium Authority.
Yeah, Stadium Authority.
Not necessarily Bears.
No.
Right,
Stadium Authority, and that would be publicly owned, and it would have to be paid for by higher taxes on folks in Northwest Indiana. In Illinois, this is a mega projects bill that would institute this in lieu of property taxes. So a mega project like the Bears in Arlington Heights would get to not pay property taxes because they would be very high, hundreds of millions. Instead, they would get to negotiate an in lieu of fee to go to the local governments instead of property taxes. This would save them massive amounts on their tax bill. And it's something that passed out of committee here in Illinois 13-7 on party lines. Democrats supported it, Republicans against it, but many Chicago Democrats still not quite sure they want to go this route. And so they adjourned before the House could even have a full vote today.
And talk about the hesitation there, what it sounds like for people who may think that might come back to haunt them.
Well, I think that they're worried about a few things. The Chicago lawmakers don't want to just vote to allow the Bears to walk and subsidize it without getting some for the city. And so could that mean they want to negotiate the Bears paying a higher fee to break their lease than they have to pay by law? And we reported this week on, plans for Soldier Field post-Bears. It's going to cost money. So maybe that's part of this is, can Chicago lawmakers wrest some extractions out of the Bears to give to Soldier Field in exchange for this favorable bill in Arlington Heights? So right now, like we said, they moved the ball and then they punted, and the House adjourned, and they're not back until March 18th.
And
a lot can happen between
Bears wanted something on the books by the end of February. So will this be enough?
Only they know. Only they know. And I think yes, because what they've said is, well, we're still doing our due diligence in Hammond. They're not ready. They're not ready. They're still going to do some site surveying for several weeks there. And so this is not a done deal. And, I think that Governor Pritzker wants it to get done. Clearly, he has stepped up his influence here on the Illinois side, but it didn't have the votes in the House yet. It's just not there. That usually they adjourn when they know they don't have the votes.
And you say stepped up influence, but he's also changed his tune a lot.
Oh yeah, we want to keep the Bears here. He's actually, Pritzker's long been in favor of this mega projects idea because he wants more mega developments in Illinois, and so Pritzker's not their hurdle right now. It's the Chicago lawmakers, House members and senators that don't want to just vote to let the Bears pack their bags and go to Arlington Heights. So that's always where the Bears have had to lobby, and they've come up short for 3 years, and still it doesn't look like they're there. What's it going to take? The House Speaker Chris Welch does not. He has his personal rules where he does not call a vote for a bill for a vote unless he knows it already has 60 votes of Democrats on it.
Right.
60 out of 70 something. So he needs to know that a supermajority of Democrats are already supporting it before he calls it. That's different. Mike Madigan used to be like, hey, you're voting for this, you're voting for this, you're voting for this, you're not voting for this.
A few problems came from that.
A few problems came from that.
Just
this
a
is a
few.
more democratic, let's be honest, this is a more democratic way of doing it, but there are some folks, you know, in the Bears camp that are like, hey, you're the Speaker of the House. Why don't you just twist some arms and get them to vote? And Welch is sticking by his rules, saying, I need to see 60 members, and that includes a lot of Chicago members before I can let this go. So that, like we said, it's like they had 3 first downs and then punted, and now Indiana's got the ball, and they're making some progress. And I, you know, it really is, I think it comes down to George McCaskey and Kevin Warren. Are they comfortable going to Hammond? Are they comfortable with the progress seen in Illinois that this can get done in the next few weeks? Because every day costs the Bears more money, that they're not, you know, doing construction. I think that they want to go to Arlington Heights. But if it becomes too impossible to do it, then everything I've been told is they will walk. And it's not a leverage play, and it's not arm twisting, but only they know.
Yeah.
Only the Bears know, and maybe they don't know. Maybe Mr. McCaskey, the chairman, is still in his head, like, you know, he hasn't made up his mind. Like, when he's really faced with a rubber meets the road, like, here's Indiana on a silver platter.
Right. Yeah.
Is he going to pull the trigger? I don't know. I don't know. That Arlington Heights property is what they've had their eyes on. They own the land. It's massive. It's got a lot of advantages for them. Every observer says that's their best bet. They just want Illinois lawmakers to move. So will this be enough, or are they jaded by 3 years of inaction to say, like, well, now you adjourn the House, you might never come back and do this?
Yeah.
So,
and that you risk losing what's on the table in Indiana in the process of waiting again for Illinois.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, before I let you go, recap last night's very long debate.
Yeah, a very long, 2 separate panels, because there's like 15 people running in this 9th congressional district, the North Shore, North Side. And I mean, I think the big issues in this debate are this issue of who's funding who, and dark money, and AIPAC, the Israel lobby, huge Jewish American population in this, but also I would say one of the more diverse districts in America. I mean, you talk about Rogers Park and Uptown and Edgewater, you've got refugees, you've got Muslim, you've got Black, Latino, white, LGBT. I mean, you've got probably 90 different languages spoken. So, but a very high concentration of Jewish Americans, and so you've got on our main panel the top 3 polling candidates: Daniel Biss and Laura Fine, Jewish Americans. Fine, a little more pro-Israel. Biss, maybe, you know, critical of Israel, but not necessarily a total critic. And then Abu Ghazala, Kat Abu Ghazala, who's a Palestinian American, who has been super critical of Israel and AIPAC. And that's where a lot of the hate and the negativity and the ads have focused on in that race. And so they all tried to stake their ground. And then we had the 3 kind of B panel people saying, hey, they're all bad. Vote for us. We're the grassroots people. So they're all up on YouTube. You know, it's getting some traction because this race has gotten a lot of national attention. Because it really means, Kat Abu Ghazala said, this is about where you want the Democratic Party to go. If you vote for me, I'm gonna pull out all the stops. I'm gonna be an activist. We need to be more progressive. We need to gum up the system. The other 2 seem to be more like politics. That as it has been, even though Daniel Biss has said, hey, I've been out there protesting too.
He kind of still, all of them would like to say they're progressive, but it's about
there's not a whole lot of space between where they stand. It's just then in that nuance about Israel or ICE and whether you should shut down the House or whether you should do extreme things, which Abu Ghazala says we're at that moment where Democrats should. And so that's where the split is, and I think it's a very close race, and yeah, how that goes in this primary will go a long way to determining what is the direction of the Democratic Party. As even today you see the report in the Washington Post that President Trump is trying to figure out some legal justification for an emergency executive order to seize control of voting. Like, let's be honest, voting is the purview of state and local authorities, not the president. He does not have a legal role, but they're trying to find one. that's maybe a 3-alarm fire if you're someone who is talking about voter access and whether you're worried about some shenanigans here, if someone is just going to have all that control.
With just a couple of weeks to go before these primaries,
Before the primaries,
again,
but of
March
course,
17th.
Yeah, and whatever the president does, I think it would probably impact the November general. Yeah, and that's what they're racing against the clock to do something for that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot happening.
There's a lot going on, but we know you're covering it and covering it well. So thank you so much for coming up to get us up to speed on what's going on, especially with the Bears this week. We'll see you later on this evening.
Thanks, Anita.
Okay. All right. 3:30, everyone. Give us 2 minutes. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's 3:31 right now, and we're going to have a discussion about UFOs. Are you ready? Over the last year, there has been an increased interest and really response to the notion that information has been held back when it comes to what else is out there in the universe. We saw the documentary, Age of Disclosure. It opened up a lot of questions. We saw President Obama, who was asked about it, and he said, well, I didn't see the evidence of it in any type of data, but I think they might be, there might be aliens out there. And shortly after that, we saw President Trump say, release the data. And Secretary Hegseth say we're scrambling to get the documents released. So let's talk about where we are with this and where we're going. Kira Wong O'Connor is with us in a moment, but John Stewart, who is a Chicago-based investigative producer, is joining me now. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you how far you think we've come in this discussion about UFOs out there and the possibility of more being out there than what we've ever been led to understand.
Well, I don't think we've come very far at all with this discussion. We are still playing the X-Files music. When people like me come on a newscast, newscasters are still giggling like it's a joke. And somebody like me, who was not into the subject at all, fell down this national intelligence rabbit hole, and you come to find out that in the past 80 years we've probably spent $2 to $3 trillion covering up craft, the occupants of the craft, murdering whistleblowers and scientists to keep the secret and obfuscate it from the public. My phone has been incurred electronically 3 times by the United States government. This is deadly serious, and I think it's high time that the media and the public need to take a step back and go, wait a minute, okay, we're listening. Tell us what's going on. Tell us how serious this can get for us. And I've been telling people for 72 hours now, what you're going to see in the weeks and months to come is going to be an ontological shock to the point of 9/11 and the day after the JFK murder. Trust me on this, because no one is ready. A public that bashes each other over the head for a $10 toaster on Black Friday at Target is not ready to see a 1975 16 millimeter film of a craft coming down at an Air Force base with occupants coming out that don't look human.
But do you think that that could be a part of the reason why it's been held for so long?
Of course it is. It's one of the problems, is the shock of all this. The second problem is, and no one will tell you this, is the government truly doesn't know where these things come from, where these beings come from. I want people, I cannot stress enough how scary this is to the men and women in the intelligence communities of the government for the past 80 years. They don't know for sure if they're interstellar, if they're interdimensional, do they fold in? And that's what the growing consensus is that they actually fold in from another dimension. Now, physicists like Einstein have proven categorically that other parallel dimensions do exist. So that is the fear of the government, is to tell the American people, we have no control over our skies. We really don't have a control over this species, non-human intelligence, transiting and coming to Earth. They might be abducting people from this planet and conducting experiments, genetics and with DNA mostly. And the last part is, we have garnered technology from reverse engineering these craft, we, the American government, and we are not going to give this to belligerent actors like Russia and China. And I agree with that. I think the technology, this is the most important thing right now, is the technology. And we cannot absolutely, under any circumstance, let people like in countries like China and Russia have our technology. We have to be 20 to 30 years ahead military of anybody else in the world. That's a given.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the need for the secrecy.
And so there is a stated need for secrecy, but there's also a moment that we're in where the president is calling for the Secretary of Defense to produce the files. Do you agree that the files should be released?
I think the files should have been released 40 years ago. Look, I get it. In 1945, the Roswell crash happens. It was not the first crash on American soil, ladies and gentlemen. However, it was the signature crash. I understand you want to keep it under wraps. You don't know what these beings are. You don't know if it was from another country. You're totally blown away with the technology. I get that. But it's 2026, and it's time that we at least are told, like we are adults, like we are citizens, our country, our tax dollars that you're using to keep this secret from us, we at least deserve to know there is non-human intelligent beings coming to this planet. They've probably been coming here for up to 100,000 years. They have manipulated our DNA. So says geneticists, so says the government, abductees, and the beings themselves. Part of my documentary is what's called the Alien Retention and Interrogation Program that happens south of Area 51 in an underground facility where we retained and we interrogated these beings up to 30 years. And the beings have said to us, watch the sun, something with the sun, and yes, we basically were the architects of humanity. Now you try and tell somebody that maybe it wasn't a god with a beard and a white robe that created us. It was bizarre looking beings from another planet or solar system or dimension that created us. It's shocking. It's I don't think a lot of people are ready to hear. And I've done my due diligence. I've come forward amid scrutiny to tell people you don't have any idea what you are about to see. And I don't think it's going to be from the government. I think it's going to be retired intel agents that have been waiting to release information, that are disgruntled by the government's cover-up, that take President Trump's call to release this information and say, I now have the legal authority, so says the president, and I've got this 16 millimeter film from the 70s in my closet, and I'm going to release it on YouTube, and I'm going to shock the world. I guarantee you that's going to happen.
So what made you start on this journey of learning these things? And obviously there would be other people who look at you and say, how does he know all of this if it hasn't been released?
It's a great question. There was a documentary that came out in 1997 called the Area 51 Alien Interview. It was very casual, very unprofessional to some degree. It was not a Hollywood production. Although the room was dark, the medics were in short sleeve scrubs. They came to attend to this being that had a respiratory attack. There was a bizarre green monitor in it, and an acronym on the bottom that said DNI, which stood for the whistleblower said the Department of Naval Intelligence. This whistleblower named Victor claimed he smuggled this out of the facility called S4 south of Area 51. This stood in my mind for 30 years. I can't explain it. And one day, I don't know, out of boredom or just trying to dissipate how much this film has bothered me for 30 years, because I knew there was something wasn't right with it. I started to investigate it. I wasn't a ufologist. I didn't know anybody in the military or in ufology, but I was like Rudy Rudiger from the movie. I had this passion to at least find out the truth. I thought it was a hoax. And as I started to go on podcasts and simply ask for help, literally members of the intelligence community in Washington, D.C. slowly started to contact me and give me dribs and drabbles to tell me that film is real. This is the being. This is where this being was from. And this was the military men that were in the room. I got enough information that the medical doctor on this film, I talked to his widow, and I'm actually interviewing his stepdaughter who lives in South Chicago suburbs next week. This is real. This is a real phenomenon. And these members of this intelligence community surrounded me. And again, like the movie Rudy, laughed at me. Then they slowly started to believe in me. They saw my passion to find the truth. That's all. And they helped me figure out what this was. And it was part of this extraterrestrial retention and interrogation program. And I know everything about it. And in the movie, so says a Vatican priest that I met in Havana, believe it or not. He said, look, if you can prove this film, this is more important than the Dead Sea Scrolls. Unless somebody's got a Polaroid of the crucifixion or Moses parting the Red Sea, you're pretty much holding the most historical document in human history, because it proves one of the two oldest questions: are we alone? And it proves that we're not, and it also proves that the government knew about it, and they've been covering this up for 80 years.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Do you feel like this is actually going to happen this time? I mean, something that you have been waiting for decades. Do you think that it's actually going to happen this time? And what do you think will happen once it's out there?
That's a really good question, and I'm so glad I came on the show. That is a really well thought out question, and I'm not being condescending. I'm being appreciative. I don't think the government is going to produce, with Donald Trump at a podium, a 4K high res film of a craft coming down at some Air Force base in the 70s with beans come out. I just don't think that any person in this program, and it's called the Legacy Program, run by the Defense Intelligence Agency in conjunction with the CIA. Just wanted to get that clear. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see some very foggy JFK era documents stating that we've got craft and communicating with the FBI director. I think you're going to find documents from other military people, crash retrieval groups, stating about occupants in silver shiny suits. But the film, again, I think I'm going to be proven right. The film that is going to shock the world, or films that are going to shock the world, is going to come from outside sources that were once with the government, that somehow got this material, got these films, and they're going to show it to the public, and maybe force the president of the United States or Pete Hegseth to say it's real. But I don't think they're going to trot out an alien a dead alien. From what I have been told, we don't have any more living non-human intelligence in any of the underground facilities. Let me tell you another bombshell. This whole program is still going on, the reverse engineering of metal and biological material. It happens at Michaels Airfield, the Dugway Proving Grounds. They built this massive high-tech underground labyrinth because Area 51 was becoming too well-known, and people were actually peeking in from it from other mountaintops. So this is still going on, spending hundreds of billions of dollars of our tax dollars to study little beings and the metal. I know that's important, but the money aspect bothers me. But Dugway Proving Grounds, that's the place if you want to put your investigative binoculars to. That is the place where this, still to this day, they are researching and back engineering metal and biological material, and it's terrifying.
Okay, well, there's a lot for us to consider here, and we'll see what happens in the next several weeks here, whether something is produced or whether the can really is just kicked down the road. John Stewart, Chicago-based investigative producer, thank you so much for weighing in. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's 3:45 right now, everyone. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back with a very special tribute to Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, Sr. Welcome back, everyone. It's 3:47 right now, and throughout the day, people from near and far have poured into Rainbow Push headquarters to pay tribute to a man who fought for equal rights for all. You can see them still coming in, still taking a moment to take in this history right now. And someone who joined them first thing this morning was Mayor Brandon Johnson, who called Reverend Jackson a mentor and a friend, and he is joining me now. Thank you so much for the honor. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
What did it mean to you to be there this morning and to take in this moment yourself?
Yeah, well, first of all, we are still praying and lifting up the Jackson family, Mrs. Jackson, the Jackson children and grandchildren. This is obviously a very difficult time for them as they celebrate the life of their grandfather, father, and of course, the husband of Mrs. Jackson. but we're also celebrating his incredible life and legacy. To see, lines of people wrapped around blocks coming from all over the country to pay homage and respect to someone who lived an honorable life. It is quite humbling to experience that because, Chicago was the place in which Reverend Jackson's politics begin to illuminate, not just here in Chicago, but around the globe. So the homage that's being paid and the tribute that's being paid to him today by people around the globe, it's just a remarkable testament to the Rainbow Coalition that he built.
The Rainbow Coalition that he built that has a through line to you and where you are today. Talk about his influence on your taking up, going into politics.
Yeah, so I had a chance to really spend more time with Reverend Jackson when I became an organizer, fighting for public accommodation, something that, he believed in, post the Civil War. These were demands of the formerly enslaved: education, housing, healthcare, transportation, good paying jobs. And, I learned so much from Reverend Jackson as an organizer, someone who was, unafraid to take on the political establishment, someone who was unafraid to challenge the corporations and the ultra rich to pay their fair share in taxes, someone who was very outspoken about endless wars against nations around the globe. And, he was the one that saw someone in me as he saw everyone that way, where somebody was everybody. And I learned incredible amount of just love and appreciation for humanity from him. And as we took on the power structure in this city, I gained a great deal of confidence of knowing that someone like Reverend Jackson placed his stamp of approval on me, of someone who can take on the same establishment that he challenged from the very beginning of his time as an organizer and as a civil rights leader here in Chicago and for the entire country.
As you mentioned, he did say, and is famous for saying, I am somebody. What do you think? One of the things that I have watched throughout the day is the multi-generational moment that we're in of people filing through, seeing that generation that saw him at his height, really, fighting for a cause after another, versus young people who maybe don't know all of that history. What do you say, especially to the young people who are learning all of this now, and where they go with it from here?
Well, this is an incredible time to know about the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson, as young people are calling out the hypocrisy of this country. This country is bombing nations around the world, and Reverend Jackson was on the front line speaking out against genocide and endless wars. This generation is very clear about how American imperialism has promulgated the type of disruption that Reverend Jackson was trying to interrupt. And I believe we're also at a time in which, as we fight for healthcare for every single person, it was Reverend Jackson, of course, that ran on a single payer system where everyone would have access to healthcare. That's something that resonates with young people today. And then, of course, investing in our education. As you know, in the city of Chicago, we have hired 31,119 young people for summer jobs. I invested over $1 billion into our public education system. We've expanded mental behavioral health care, and we're challenging these big corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. That was the message that Reverend Jackson brought to the forefront in 1984 and in 1988 when he ran for president. These are many of the same challenges, of course, that we face today, and young people are on the front line fighting for environmental justice, fighting for educational justice, fighting against endless wars, ensuring that we have access to public accommodations. So this is a perfect time to not only learn about Reverend Jackson, but to carry on that torch of liberation and justice for all.
What do you make of us losing him during Black History Month?
Yeah, this is obviously a time in which we reflect on our nation's history and the contributions that Black folks have provided to the soul of America. And, to lose such an incredible icon during this month, it's as difficult as it is. I'm thinking about those who came before him and those that he learned from, like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and how much Dr. King trusted Reverend Jackson when he came to Chicago. I'm on the 5th floor right now where Dr. King came and looked power in the face, Mayor Richard J. Daley, and challenged him to build more affordable homes and to end the segregation practices that have kept Black folks and people of color out of opportunity. And, Dr. King said that he had not experienced anything like quite what he experienced here in Chicago. And then he left Reverend Jackson in charge. And I think it's, somewhat as a sign or an omen to us that our history, the fight for Black liberation, which essentially is liberation for every single one, that we will always mark Dr. King and, of course, Reverend Jackson's legacy to the month that we especially pay attention to, which is Black History Month. And then as we prepare to say our final farewell, which will be right around the time of the Bloody Sunday, as we commemorate the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, as Reverend Jackson and others took on the powerful forces of their day. It just gives us that much more hope that we can take on the powerful forces of our day, and we can continue, of course, to make sure that hope always lives.
It was there in Selma that Reverend Jackson asked for a job to Martin Luther King that sent him here to the city of Chicago. Do you feel as though those who obviously walked that bridge that day, they lifted a weight for many of us who have come since, but do you feel a sense of greater weight watching these icons pass?
Yeah, as a former social studies teacher, having taught in our public schools and understanding the historic moment that we're in today, it is a somber moment, but it's also an opportunity for us to step up and lead. Reverend Jackson lived his life. He did his part. He paid the cost, right, to be honored in a way in which he's being honored today. In fact, one of my fondest memories is when I spent some time with Reverend Jackson in Selma, and he talked about organizing from town to town to get to that bridge and how difficult it was. And now history tells you that everybody believes that they were on that bridge that day. But the truth of the matter is that that movement was just beginning to find its legs. And he said, Brandon, as a new and a young organizer, don't despise the little things. It's the small, intimate conversations that we had along the way to get to the Edmund Pettus Bridge that built our confidence. It was difficult. We knew on the other side of the bridge, hatred was waiting for us. And he said, we crossed that bridge anyways, because we knew that once we crossed that bridge and that once we stared down and faced the hatred that was awaiting us, we were confident that one day that Black, brown, white, Asian immigrants, the formerly enslaved, could all come together and experience the true hope of what this country stands for, which is justice for all. So I'll never forget that moment in Selma, and I will continue to make sure that Reverend Jackson's desire to see hope remain alive, that I do that in this role as mayor of Chicago, as we invest in young people, as we invest in education, as we invest to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, as we invest in mental and behavioral health care. Those are the things that Reverend Jackson stood for, and that's what I'm standing for as mayor of the city of Chicago.
That through line of hope has taken us from Reverend Jackson to President Barack Obama. And of course, the services have begun here. They will end here next weekend. And we so appreciate you taking some time to be with us. Now, what do you think a young Jesse Jackson would tackle right now in the city of Chicago as I leave you?
Yeah, well, I'm encouraging every person in the city of Chicago and around the area and around the country to come and pay your respect to Reverend Jackson. Those lines are long, but it's worth it. And the family, I know, appreciates it. And I believe that a young Jesse Jackson who had such great instinct would be taking on these big corporations and the ultra wealthy in this country that have received the largest tax break in the history of America. Once upon a time, we had presidents who declared war on poverty. Now we have a president who has declared war on poor people and working people. Reverend Jackson will be standing firm for workers' rights. He would be standing with the labor movement. He would be standing with the entrepreneurs and the small businesses that want to help employ other people. He would be standing with our young people. He would ensure that our public accommodations will be fully funded. And so if we're going to preserve our democracy and make it better than what we found it, I know Reverend Jackson would take on the ultra rich and these big corporations head on, because he did it. He gave us the example. We can hold people accountable without creating enemies. We can ensure that there's enough or more than enough for everyone without anyone losing. And so again, as he saw somebody in everybody, that's what he would call for today. And that's what we're going to live up to in his honor as the mayor of the city of Chicago, and of course, as the greatest city in the world, the city of Chicago.
Thank you so much. We do owe him a debt of gratitude, and I certainly appreciate you lending your voice to our conversation here on Chicago Live today, everyone. Mayor Brandon Johnson, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Live from Chicago, this is Fox 32 News at 4.
Next at 4, a well-known captain, a ninth